Good evening, everybody. SuperJackster01 here. Now, welcome to my very first video of 2024. Now, at the end of my update from at the end of 2023, I said my next video was going to be my comparison video of two different Blu-ray versions of the Titanic, but I decided to pull that off because this is a video I've been working on for the last 2 weeks. Now I can finally release it. I decided, just for the fun of it, I'll do a video talking about my top 20 favorite films of 2023, just for the fun of it. This will be done in a similar way of how Schaefer did his ranking videos. So, yeah, I've been working on this video for about 2 weeks, so I hope you guys like it. So, yeah, let's start this ranking video at number 20. Blue Beetle is one of those movies that you go in expecting to just be mediocre, if not bad, and then turns out to be the exact opposite. I was not expecting to enjoy this movie as much as I did. Sure, it's got a lot of the usual cliches that you see in these origin story comic book films, and the villain is pretty forgettable, but the strongest aspects are from the characters. These are some of the most likable characters I've seen in a comic book movie, and it seemed like the movie was aware of this, leading to a lot more time being spent on a lot of the family aspects, which is fine by me. I'm really sad that this was the second to last film in the DCEU because I would have loved to have seen more of these characters. Hopefully James Gunn will carry them over into his DC universe. Side note, this movie has George Lopez. Any movie with George Lopez gets extra points for me. I had a lot of fun with the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I'll admit that I was a little apprehensive when it was announced that Illumination Entertainment was going to be making a film based on Mario, considering that the studio doesn't have the strongest resume, so I was hoping that it wouldn't be a disaster. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. Despite being aimed towards kids, this movie was still able to be appealing and enjoyable to adults as well. The animation in this movie is absolutely beautiful. The world looks exactly identical to the games. I also love the voice cast. I know a lot of people were initially angry about how they casted Chris Pratt to voice Mario instead of Charles Martinet, who voiced him in every single Mario game since the 90s and 80s. But I think that was actually a smart move. One of my close friends told me that as talented as Martinet is as the character in the games, hearing Charles Martinet's Mario voice talk for like 90 minutes in the movie probably would have gotten annoying for the audience eventually. So I think Chris Pratt was the perfect balance between, not being annoying and also still sounding like Mario. Casting Anya Taylor-Joy as Princess Peach was perfect. Her voice fits the character so well, and I don't think anyone else could have fit that part better. I'm going to be honest, you might find this crazy, but I didn't know that was Jack Black voicing Bowser when I first saw the film. He was able to disguise his voice perfectly with that character. Also, his song Peaches still cracks me up every time I hear it. I'm hoping that Illumination will continue to produce films on this level of quality because I really, really enjoyed this film. Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves very much surprised me. I knew it was going to be a good movie since it was directed by the duo that directed Game Night and also co-wrote Spider-Man Homecoming, but I didn't expect it to be this good. As someone who has never played any of the games, I had a blast with this movie. The characters, the sets, and the stories were absolute top-notch. I gotta say that I love how Hugh Grant is just taking whatever roles he can get nowadays because I think he was the perfect casting for the villain of this movie. If they don't make a sequel to this film, then I hope Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez do another movie together because they just have amazing chemistry when they're on screen together. This movie is also really funny. There's a scene where the characters are able to temporarily resurrect these people from the dead and ask them 5 questions. I don't think I've ever laughed as hard as any other scene in a movie this year as I did with this one. But yeah, I really hope they make a sequel to this film because I totally would love to see more of these characters and this world. I might get a lot of hate for saying this, but I'm not the biggest fan of Wes Anderson. There are a lot of his movies that I really do like, but there are also a lot that I really dislike. Thankfully, Asteroid City is one of his movies that I liked. When I saw it in theaters back in June, I thought it was just decent and nothing too special, but the more I rewatched it, the more I really liked it. I was very apprehensive when I saw the trailer and they showed that huge cast list. I thought the movie was going to get too overwhelming with that many actors and characters. While the film occasionally does at a couple points, they were able to balance everything just fine, which really impressed me. I like the framing device of the story being presented as a play and the characters questioning aspects of the story. That little moment where they all start repeating the phrase, "You can't wake up if you don't fall asleep," really got to me, and that phrase got stuck in my head when I left the theater. That scene where Jason Schwartzman talks to Margot Robbie and she has the speech that was supposed to be said in the play and that it was cut due to length was actually pretty clever and did get a chuckle out of me. I understand that this movie might not be for everyone and totally get why a good amount of people weren't too crazy about it, but I personally enjoyed it more and more with every rewatch. I was not expecting The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes to be this high on the list. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the 4 film adaptations of the Hunger Games books, but I didn't think a prequel was going to be anything too special and would be something like Fantastic Beasts. But I'm really glad that this film was so enjoyable. Tom Blyth really impressed me as this young version of President Snow. You could see how committed he is to the role. It's interesting to see that he was heavily conflicted about the games. I do wish they had done a better job showing how he ended up going from this to the Snow that we all know from the main Hunger Games films. I feel like the sudden change in character happened just abruptly, but I digress. Rachel Zegler was great as Lucy Gray and really brought that character to life. If you people absolutely despise Rachel Zegler because of some comment she made about the Snow White remake, grow the fuck up. I'm a little conflicted on how they left the fate of her character ambiguous, but I do respect them for doing something risky. Seeing the 10th annual Hunger Games and how the tributes were treated was brutal, while also interesting. It made the games that Katniss Everdeen played in the main Hunger Games films seem merciful by comparison. Seeing how much they ran the games differently was very unique and interesting since it was very different from the advanced technology that would be used later. But yeah, a really enjoyable prequel that was worthy of being made. Wonka is a film that I went into with a very curious mind. This movie could have either been a complete disaster or a really enjoyable and fun film. It's great that it ended up being the latter. Contrary to what people are saying, this film is not a prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It is a new iteration of the character. Timothée Chalamet was a really good choice for this version of Wonka. He just makes the character so likable from the moment he first appears on screen. I also didn't know that he could sing. The musical numbers were great. I didn't think there was a single bad singing voice in this film. The lengths that Mr. Slugworth, Mr. Prodnos, and Mr. Fickelberger go to stop Wonka from succeeding are hilarious. I also like how the bribes to the chief of police really show their effect when you can see him really gaining weight over the course of the film. Whoever decided to cast Hugh Grant as an Oompa Loompa deserves a raise. I really wish we had gotten more of him in the film, but he steals the show every time he's on screen. I definitely recommend checking this movie out if you enjoyed any of the previous 2 Wonka films. It's another prequel that I think was worthy of being made. We all knew that Barbie was going to be somewhere on this list. Some of you might be shocked of it being at number 14 and not higher on the list, but that's not an insult to the film. It just shows how good the 13 films before it are. If you came up to me in 2022 and said that a film adaptation of Barbie was going to be a $1 billion blockbuster film and finish off as the highest grossing film of the following year, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are. I was optimistic that this film would be enjoyable considering it was directed and co-written by Greta Gerwig. She's a great director whose previous directed credits were both nominated for Best Picture. I was glad that my optimism was correct, if not better than I expected. I had a lot of fun with this film. Margot Robbie was spot on perfect casting as Barbie. As famous as Margot Robbie is, I don't think she gets enough credit for how great of an actress she is. She does look a lot like a live-action Barbie. Ryan Gosling was hilarious as Ken. You could tell that he was having an absolute blast in the role and just went all out. Just Ken is an absolute banger and a song that will be remembered for many decades. I do have some issues with the execution of the message and what they were going for in the third act. I might get a lot of hate for saying this, but I'm a little conflicted on the speech that America Ferrera's character gives. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad speech, but it feels like it comes out of nowhere. It's like her character had that speech planned in her head for years and was just waiting for the right excuse to say it. But I can let that pass because the speech did lead to numerous funny moments. The humor in this film is honestly pretty clever. The funniest moments aren't from funny jokes or anything like that. Most of the humor comes from moments and scenes that make you go, oh shit, I did not see that coming. But yeah, a really fun and funny movie, and I can totally understand why so many people put it in their top 10 favorite movies of the year. But we still have 13 more films to go. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant was probably the most overlooked film from last year. I really wish more people had seen it because this movie is fantastic. A really interesting look on what the army fighting in the Afghan war had to deal with when fighting against the Taliban. A large portion of the movie revolves around this Afghan interpreter carrying this wounded U.S. Army sergeant through the Afghan terrain for several days in an attempt to save his life. This leads to honestly some of the most edge-of-my-seat moments in any film that I saw this year. The amount of close calls that happen and techniques that this guy uses to avoid getting caught by the Afghans was really investing to watch. Seeing him make all those allies along the way and have them give him supplies that would keep the sergeant alive was really wholesome. The second half of the movie is also just as interesting. After the sergeant is saved and brought back home to the U.S., we see him spending nearly an entire month trying to procure U.S. visas to the Afghan and his family after they're forced into hiding to repay him with having zero success. This leads to him having numerous sleepless nights and eventually having a breakdown. Can we please give Jake Gyllenhaal an Oscar already? He has done so many fantastic performances that just get completely overlooked by the Oscars and the public in general. He really helps sell how desperate this guy is to repay the Afghan that saved his life, to the point where he decides to go back to Afghanistan, find him, and bring him back to the U.S. himself, knowing that he could get killed for this. This leads to a very intense and interesting third act that I don't want to spoil. It's really sad how not many people saw this movie because it's just amazing. Despite how great it is, though, we still have 12 movies ahead of it. The Blackening is another film that I thought was very overlooked. Now, this is technically a 2022 film because it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 16th, 2022. But I'm counting it as a 2023 film because it was released theatrically in June of 2023, and most people saw it in 2023. So that makes it qualified for a spot on this list. But I had a lot of fun with this movie and thought it was really funny. To me, this movie felt like Ready or Not and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies done correctly. It has a very similar premise to both of those movies. I personally thought those movies had very interesting concepts, but were surrounded by many writing issues, although I understand why a lot of people love them. Thankfully, the issues I had with each of those films were absent in The Blackening, which made it a lot easier to enjoy. There's so much to like about this movie. It balances comedy and horror perfectly, keeps the viewers invested and in suspense. The characters are all interesting, with each one having their own unique personalities. It has a great twist villain that was perfectly foreshadowed over the course of the film, has a lot of great horror moments and jump scares that work, has a very creative premise, and is just outright hilarious. I saw this in theaters back in June, and the entire auditorium was just howling with laughter. So if you loved Ready or Not and or Bodies, 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 then you're most likely gonna love The Blackening. I was blown away by Godzilla Minus One. I haven't seen many subtitle films before, but I decided to check this film out to see what all the hype was, and man, did it impress me. I can't believe that this movie was made on a $15 million budget, and yet it still had the look and feel of a blockbuster film. Marvel and DC should really meet with the people that worked on this film and ask them how they pulled that off. What's also really great about this movie are the human characters. I really liked and cared about the main character and this woman he meets that then leads to them parenting this orphan child that she found. It's some really emotional stuff, but I really love how the movie explores the aftermath of World War II for the people in Japan. You don't see that often in films. But yes, a fantastic movie that I can't praise any higher than it has been. I'm not going to go into other details about why I like the film because it's still kind of new, so I want to give people the opportunity to see the film themselves. Now that we're halfway through the list, let's hear from today's sponsor, Squarespace, from websites and online stores. Oh yeah, I totally forgot that this video doesn't have a sponsor. But there is something I do want to talk about for this little break. I am now on Cameo. The thing is, this year I'll be working on my sequel to Max Revenge, and we're trying to increase the budget and everything, and a lot of stuff going on. So I figured might as well get a little head start on making some side money for that. So Cameo, if you guys ever want to like message me or get a personal request a personal video for me, whether it's a birthday shout out or a request or just saying hi to you or anything like that, which will only be $15 if you ever want to, like, you know, get some kind of birthday message from me or from anyone, like, you know, or just like, you know, just to say hi or just any kind of interaction from me in general for you to send, just follow the link down in the description to that profile and place an order. So yeah. Hope you guys will be willing to help contribute to this new film project, which I'll talk about in another video. But yeah, all right, let's continue on with the ranking, shall we? I don't care what anyone says. I loved Cocaine Bear. I understand there were a good amount of people that really disliked the film and thought it was stupid, but that's kind of why I enjoyed it. I liked how the movie doesn't take itself so seriously and is aware of how stupid its premise is. Here, it's aware of, like, and basically telling the audience, yeah, we know, this is the stupidest fucking premise ever. I do have a couple minor issues with the film, though. I feel like there were some characters that just weren't necessary to the story, like Isa Whitlock Jr.'s character. There's also this female cop that's revealed to be working with the film's main antagonist, but then she just leaves the next time they're on screen. So then what was the point of all that? But a lot of the human main characters were great. The best sequence in the film is easily the scene where the Cocaine Bear is chasing after this ambulance and ends up killing everyone in it. That was a lot of fun. Honestly, this is just a movie I like to watch if I'm looking for a good laugh. I get that this film isn't for everyone, and I can understand them thinking it was stupid, but for me, this movie was awesome, and that's why it's number 10 on this list. Elemental is the latest Pixar film, and I loved it. I'm so glad that it ended up being a sleeper hit at the box office because we all know Pixar needed that after how badly Lightyear bombed. After such a low box office opening, I guess it hung around all summer because of positive word of mouth. I'm glad that it seemed like audiences loved it too. I know a lot of people initially weren't sold on the premise of this film because they thought the concept seemed too similar to Inside Out or Zootopia. I'm happy to say that it's really not like that. The town that the characters live in is so cool and creative. The relationship between Ember and Wade is great. When they first meet each other, the last thing you expect to happen is them forming a romance, but it works so well. The conflict that Ember has in regards to whether she wants to run her father's shop or do her own thing with Wade was something that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, because I think all of us have been in a situation similar to that. I can relate to Ember trying everything she can to keep her cool while trying to run the store and struggling not to get angry or snap at a customer. As someone who works as a cashier at a grocery store, I struggle with this all the time. I really gotta say that Peter Sohn really went all out and redeemed himself after The Good Dinosaur. Growing up, I was not really a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'd seen a couple episodes of the 2012 show that aired on Nickelodeon and seen clips of other iterations. They just weren't my cup of tea, but I decided to check out Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem since they had gotten all these great early reviews. I was blown away by how great it was. The animation was absolutely beautiful. I liked how they went for an art style similar to Spiderverse. The voice acting was really good. I liked how like previous iterations, they got actual teenagers to voice the turtles in this film. This helps make them sound like teenagers and makes that illusion seem more believable. Whoever came up with the idea of casting Ice Cube as the villain, Superfly, deserves a raise. He just has one of the coolest sounding voice and really fits that character. The movie is also really funny. The characters make numerous references to Shrek and Avengers Endgame, and they just were so funny. I also love the whole gag of April O'Neil being called Puke Girl on the internet after she was seen vomiting on the morning announcements. This movie also made me hungry for pizza. I don't know what it is, but the pizza in this film looked delicious. But yeah, definitely check this movie out if you haven't yet, because I guarantee you'll enjoy it even if you're not a Ninja Turtles fan. Who would have thought that a movie about the true story of how the Nike company created the Air Jordan shoes in 1984 would end up being so phenomenal? I can't even tell you how good Air was. It's one of those feel-good movies that leaves you having a smile on your face once the end credits roll. It was the first time in nearly 7 years that Ben Affleck had directed a movie, but this movie shows that he's still got it. He also fits the part of Phil Knight really well. Matt Damon is also really good as Sonny Vaccaro. That speech he gives to Michael Jordan about the future of his career is just one of the best scenes in any movie this year and completely obliterates America Ferrera's speech in Barbie. I don't know if that speech actually happened in real life, but I honestly don't care because of how amazing and kind of emotional it was. Jason Bateman is also really good in this movie. I haven't seen him in many dramatic roles, but he really fits the part of Rob Strasser really well. He could have easily just been a character that helps Sonny make the Air Jordan shoe, but they really flesh out his character and make him more sympathetic once we learn about his personal life. Viola Davis just shines as Michael Mother's mother, Dolores. I think this is easily one of her top 5 best performances of her career. I love how they never showed Michael Jordan's face at all during the pitch meeting scene. I feel like not seeing his face made the scene a lot more powerful and reminds the audience that this movie isn't about him. Despite this being a drama film, this movie has so many clever and funny jokes. There's this hilarious scene where David Falk is on the phone with Sonny yelling at him and claiming that he's going to rip his nutsack off and nibble on his testicles. I saw this film on opening day and everyone in the theater was just howling with laughter during that scene. That might be one of the funniest scenes in any movie ever, and I can't even imagine how many takes it took Chris Messina to say those lines with a straight face. But yeah, if you're looking for a feel-good movie, then this movie is definitely the film for you. If Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was meant to be Marvel's apology letter for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, then the apology is accepted. James Gunn's swan song for the MCU is very emotional and a satisfying film that wraps up the Guardians stories in special ways. Now, I still think Spider-Man No Way Home is the best post-Endgame MCU film, but this is a very close second place. There's so much to love about this film. The humor in this film is hilarious as always. James Gunn really knows the right kind of humor for these films. This film features the first F-bomb in the MCU, and I love how it was used in just a random line. That just made it so much funnier than it needed to be. I was not expecting Rocket to be the main MacGuffin for the movie. I knew that he was going to be the central focus and they were going to show his origins, but I didn't expect the movie to be about the gang trying to save his life. but I love the lengths that the Guardians were willing to go to save him. Despite how much of a dick he is to them, the Guardians truly care about Rocket, and I absolutely love that. The High Evolutionary is easily one of the top 5 best villains and might probably be the most evil and sadistic one. Let's be honest, we all wanted this guy dead more than Thanos. The scene where the Guardians just beat the living crap out of him is probably one of the most satisfying moments in the entire MCU. Rocket's backstory is just so sad and heartbreaking that I'm sure it was hard to watch for people who are sensitive to animal cruelty. I also really love what they do with a lot of the characters and how they don't kill anyone off. This is an emotionally satisfying film that's a perfect send-off to the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I hope future MCU films can be on this level of quality. The Holdovers is definitely a film that I'll be adding to my list of films that I watch every holiday season. This is another one of those feel-good movies that leaves you with a smile on your face at the end, even though the ending to this film is bittersweet. Since the movie takes place in 1970, I love how it was shot and made to look like a film that was made during that time. Fun fact, my cousin Andrew is actually a student at the school where they shot the scenes taking place at Barton Academy. I've always been a fan of Paul Giamatti, but I gotta say that this is probably the best performance of his entire career. Seriously, his performance as Professor Hunnell blew me away. Dominic Sessa, forgive me if I mispronounce that, makes his film debut in this movie, and my God, he knocked it out of the park. I truly think that he has a full career ahead of him. His performance as Angus really helped the audience have sympathy for the character and understand the struggles that he's going through. The scene where he visits his dad at the institution was so heartbreaking and bittersweet. I also really loved the character of Mary. It was very interesting to see her try to bottle up how she's feeling with the death of her son before finally letting it all out at the Christmas party. Her trying to be the voice of reason between Huddle and Angus was very smartly written. Honestly, whoever thought that the cafeteria lunch lady would be a main character of a film and really stand out? The relationship between Hunnam and Angus was definitely the best part of the film. They both have their own little character arcs that really work. Seeing them bond and getting along more and more while they're in Boston was so satisfying to watch. The ending of the film is very bittersweet. It sucked to see Hunnam lose his job because he chose to take the blame for Angus visiting his father, but also shows how much he's grown to care for the kid. It was great to see him call Angus's mother and stepfather for abandoning him during holiday break to go on their honeymoon. The ultimate icing on the cake was him calling out the school administrator a human form of penis cancer. The whole theater laughed and cheered when he said that. But yeah, I can't give this film any higher praise, and I'm so glad that so many people consider it one of the best films of the year. It's sure to become a holiday classic. John Wick Chapter 4 is fucking amazing, and easily the best John Wick film. There is so much that I love about this movie that I don't even know where to start. The action scenes are well choreographed and fun to watch. Keanu Reeves gives another stellar performance, and you can tell how much he loves playing this character. Bill Skarsgård plays an excellent villain. Mr. Krabs has a supporting role. There's this blind guy who is a complete badass and shows you to never underestimate blind people. And the cinematography. My God, this is one of the most beautiful looking action films ever. The entire third act is probably some of the most action-packed, edge-of-my-seat fun that I've had in a movie in a long time. That entire third act was made to be seen on the big screen. The whole shootout occurring in the abandoned house was awesome and visually amazing to look at, especially that one-shot drone sequence where it's just one continuous take of all the fights going on in the house. I also loved seeing John save Mr. Nobody's dog. Then we have the entire fight sequence on the stairs. My God, that was awesome. The continuous shot of John then falling down the stairs was funny and then became badass again when he and Kane fought all those guys on the stairs a second time. This is one of the few action films that I think is absolutely flawless. My only minor hiccup I have with the film is I think it's a little bit too long, but I can let that pass because of how fun all the action scenes were. Despite the fact that the ending seems to indicate that this is the final film in the main series, I really hope they do a fifth movie. But if they don't, then that's fine by me, because this could also be a perfect series finale. Even if you've never seen any of the other John Wick films, I still recommend checking this movie out because it is a masterpiece. And yet, we still have 3 more films on this list to go. I've only seen Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse one time and haven't seen it since I saw it on opening night. But that's not because I didn't like the film or just haven't had the time to rewatch it. But it's because I know that rewatches will never feel as special or amazing as the first viewing was. This is a crowning achievement in animation. I think that the nearly 5-year wait was totally worth it. You could tell that they really wanted to take their time and made sure that they created a worthy follow-up to their 2018 beloved film. There's so much that I could say that I won't say because it's been said numerous times by other reviewers, and I'm sure everyone will probably have the same thoughts as me. So I'm not going to go into any other details about spoilers because I want everyone to see for themselves. But man, this might go down as an animation achievement. That entire chase sequence with all the Spider-Mans might be one of my top 10 favorite scenes in any animated film. It's so visually beautiful to look at, and that cliffhanger, my god, I didn't expect that was going to be how the film ended because I totally forgot that this was part one of a story. But I'm glad I did forget because it made the cliffhanger that much more shocking. Whenever Beyond the Spiderverse eventually gets released, I hope it'll be another masterpiece. If it is, then the Spiderverse films could go down as one of the greatest film trilogies ever made. Let's all hope that it'll end up being worth it. Oppenheimer might be one of the greatest and most important films of the 21st century. This is easily Christopher Nolan's best movie since Inception. I can't even begin to describe how amazing this movie is. I don't even know where to start. The cast in this movie is incredible. There wasn't a single good performance from any actor in the film. Instead, every single actor in this film gave a phenomenal performance, regardless of how much screen time they had. I truly think that Cillian Murphy will both be nominated and win the Oscar for Best Actor. He gave my favorite performance from any movie that came out in this year. Another fantastic performance in the film is that of Robert Downey Jr. playing Louis Strauss. He gives it his all in this performance, and you could tell that this was the exact kind of role that he'd been wanting to play after 11 years of playing Iron Man. Because I didn't know the history, I was not expecting that big twist with his character. I won't spoil it in this video, but man, it was something that I didn't see coming and surprised me in a good way. The scene where they test the atomic bomb for the first time was probably my favorite scene in any Christopher Nolan movie. The suspense and build-up to it really had me on the edge of my seat. The explosion sounds flew right across the IMAX theater surround sound systems and made me feel like I was actually there. The pacing of this movie is perfect. It has a runtime of 3 hours and it just flew by. Every single scene in the film was an integral part of the story that Nolan was trying to tell, and that just really impressed me. The whole thing of the movie going back and forth between black and white and color was both risky and smart. The color scenes were meant to be moments that happened from Oppenheimer's perspective, while the black and white scenes were moments that happened from the perspective of other characters. I do recommend fully paying attention during the opening scene of the film so you'll be able to understand when the film goes between the past and the present, but you should be able to pick up on it real easily after a couple minutes. Although this isn't my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, I think this is probably his magnum opus. I can't give any higher praise to this movie than hasn't already been given yet. But yet, a masterpiece that will be remembered for years to come. Yet, there is still one more film on this list that I think is better. Top Gun Maverick finished off as my favorite movie of 2022. After that, I was curious about how Tom Cruise was going to be able to release a worthy follow-up to that masterpiece, or if he was going to be able to at all. Shockingly, he did. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 might be one of the greatest action movies of all time, and is my favorite Mission Impossible film. I didn't think they were going to be able to release another phenomenal sequel, considering that Fallout set the bar pretty high in terms of quality, yet they actually did. I feel like Christopher McQuarrie doesn't get the amount of credit that he deserves. He's a phenomenal writer and director, and I can totally see why Tom Cruise has had him work on all of his movies during the last 15 years. There is so much that I love about this film. Victor and Benji are still absolutely hilarious as they always are. The airport scene was a lot of fun and kept me on the edge of my seat the whole time. I really enjoyed the relationship between Ethan and Grace. Tom Cruise and Haley Atwell have amazing chemistry. I'm really excited to see more of that in the sequel. The chase scene in Rome was great. It was hilarious when Ethan and Grace had to drive around in that tiny yellow car. Speaking of which, the humor was great as always. The scene where Dellinger is asking the community about the job description of the IMF was hilarious. Let me tell you something about that scene of Ethan driving his motorcycle off a cliff. That scene was the reason why I decided to see the film in IMAX. I felt like I was actually falling with him. I do wish that they hadn't shown that scene in all the trailers though. However, I guess I can forgive them for that because they obviously needed a selling moment. That whole climax on the train was awesome. I was on the edge of my seat the whole way through. Ethan and Grace jumping from car to car reminded me a lot of the skyscraper chase scene in Furious 7. Gabriel was also a pretty decent villain. His fate at the end of the film was priceless though. But man, what can I say about this movie that hasn't been said before? I love this film. I think this is easily the best movie of 2023. I am so excited to see the sequel when it comes out next year in 2025. All right. Now, I hope you enjoyed that ranking. Let me down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on your favorite films of 2023. And yeah, I will see you all for my next video, which will be a comparison video of 2 different Blu-ray versions of Titanic.